Welcome to All Theory, No Conspiracy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click to receive notifications, and leave a comment. From the 1960s to the late 1980s, we lived under the constant threat of nuclear war. We were told that a president in the US and a president in Russia with itchy trigger fingers were ready to press a button that would annihilate most of the people in the world. The survivors would be subjected to radiation sickness and a bleak, short future under the cloud of nuclear fallout. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union lasted for over 30 years and resulted in international incidents that allegedly often had the two superpowers on the brink of nuclear disaster. While the Soviet Union and the USA were allies during World War II and fought together against Nazi Germany, they were uneasy allies, and there seemed to be a level of distrust that existed between them due to ideological differences in politics and over the atrocities committed by longtime Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. While the enmity between the two never resulted in actual warfare, there was a lot of posturing on both sides, with the discontent from the US being a belief that the USSR were slowly plotting a takeover of European countries, and the Soviets were concerned about the buildup of US military strength around the world. There was also a concern from both sides in regard to each other's attempts to explore space beyond the Earth, and to successfully land astronauts on the surface of the Moon. However, there was an incident in October of 1962 that allegedly brought the world to the brink of nuclear holocaust. The Cuban Missile Crisis lasted from October 16th to 26th, 1962. It started when the US allegedly placed nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey in 1961. The US had begun a prolonged terrorist attack against Cuba known as the Cuban Project. The declassified document of Operation Northwoods provides more details about that. The USSR became concerned when Cuba began to lean towards a relationship with China, with whom the Soviets had strained relations. Soviet President Nikita Kruschev agreed with Fidel Castro to place nuclear missiles in Cuba to deter a future invasion. The USSR began installation in July 1962. After a reconnaissance mission by a US U-2 spy plane confirmed the presence of nuclear sites in Cuba, the US created a naval quarantine in the sea near Cuba to prevent more missiles and supplies from reaching the island nation. The term quarantine was used because blockade would have been considered an act of war. After 13 days of negotiations, it was agreed that the USSR would dismantle and return all nuclear weaponry to the Soviet Union, and the US agreed to cease its campaign against Cuba. The US had also secretly agreed to remove all ballistic missiles from Italy and Turkey. The U.S. quarantine remained in place until November of 1962. This, and the fact that the U.S. had only secretly agreed to dismantle their weaponry, while the Soviets very publicly backed away from Cuba, angered Khrushchev. This set the stage for the remainder of the Cold War. In the 1960s, well after the Cuban Missile Crisis, school children were subjected to nuclear drills, which were held with the assumption that each drill was real. These drills were announced by the sound of an air raid siren. Children would either line up in school hallways or sit under their desks, where they would tuck their knees, lace their hands behind their heads, then bend forward and hold that position until the drill was over. As previously mentioned, every drill was presented as a possibility that it was real. This was a cause of psychological trauma. In 1983, when the ongoing threat of nuclear annihilation had reached a fever pitch, a TV movie called The Day After premiered on the ABC television network. The Day After depicted a world during the build-up to and after a catastrophic nuclear war between the US and the Soviet Union. This TV movie was overhyped with news programs and made-for-TV documentaries discussing its effect on the psyche of the viewing public. It allegedly had such a profound effect on then US President Ronald Reagan that it compelled him to completely rethink US policy on nuclear disarmament. The idea that a fictionalized, made-for-TV movie had triggered the end of the Cold War is absurd. Moreover, it also makes 30 years of propaganda seem like it was nothing except media-based fiction. Propaganda is a lie by definition. TV and the media at large played a large part in propagating nuclear fear. It begs the question as to whether there was ever actually a real possibility of nuclear war, or if the capability to launch it ever existed. There never was an actual nuclear war, only the threat of it. There were also the alleged nuclear events in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan near the end of World War II. Whatever happened there did not cause unending nuclear fallout, as we were taught nuclear war would, and Japan became a thriving economic superpower in the years after. I am not attempting to diminish the horror of what was inflicted on Japan and its people at that time. I am simply suggesting that if it was a nuclear bombing, the long-term effects were not nearly as devastating as the immediate effects were. Japan and the countries surrounding it should have had untold losses from years of fallout and radiation poisoning. They did not. This overly propagandized threat of nuclear war may have been an exercise in mass trauma-based programming that was perpetrated by the governments and the media. To believe that the United States has the authority to elect the most powerful person in the world every 4 years by populist vote is absurd. To also believe that this person has the power to blow up the world is asinine. Trauma-based programming is defined as this. Trauma-based mind control, TBMC, is repetitive trauma a person endures that causes him or her to be submissive to another in thoughts, will, and choices. The repeated threat of nuclear war over a 30-year period caused people to suffer nightmares, anxiety, depression, and in some cases, PTSD as a result. There will be links to articles about the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the day after, and trauma-based mind control, as well as links to YouTube videos about nuclear drills in schools and about mass psychosis and how a society can become mentally ill, in the description below this video. The end? Stay tuned for more content from All Theory, No Conspiracy. Thank you for watching.